Yesterday, we did the prepare to read page. Someone remind me what type of text we're reading this week. Remind me, Mia. Yes, and we're reading an informational text. It's going to give us facts about the topic. The topic is clearly parrots in Puerto Rico. That would be the topics. And remember, we have these really cool illustrations that are actually collages. I need you on page 356, which is the start of our story. And as you can see, like that looks like a crazy forest. You can see some birds in there, but it's definitely paper cut and layered over each other to make a super cool collage. And it says, above the treetops in Puerto Rico flies a flock of parrots as green as their island home. If you look up from the forest and you are very lucky, you might catch the bright blue flashes of their flight feathers and hear their harsh call. What's a flock? Connor, if you are not doing what you are supposed to be doing, I'm going to be very upset. What's a flock, Abria? Yeah, it's a group of birds. So I don't remember if it was this class or another class. I asked, how did the birds travel? Do you think they're singular? Do you think they're in a pair? So a flock, they're in a group of birds, okay? These are Puerto Rican parrots. They live on this island. They lived on this island for millions of years, and then they nearly vanished from the earth forever. This is their story. So, if an animal vanishes from Earth forever, what did they almost become? What's that actual scientific word, Dylan? Okay, well, the word is extinct, would be the actual scientific word. They almost became extinct, which means they were what? Olivia?
They were endangered.
Yes, so they were once an endangered species, almost becoming extinct, and that's what we're going to be learning about within our story. So, the next page is when we actually officially start the story. All right? So, paragraph 3. Long before people came to Puerto Rico, hundreds of thousands of parrots flew over the island and the smaller islands nearby. Guaca, guaca! The parrots called as they looked for deep nesting holes in tall trees. Down below, waves from the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean washed the island's white sand beaches. Delicate orchids and widespread ferns, tiny tree frogs, capoke trees, brushing with seed pods, when one big scaly iguana with seeds and big scaly iguanas covered the land. So, just imagine you're in Puerto Rico, there's beautiful beaches, there's ocean, and then there's nice forests with tall, tall trees, there's ferns, there's flowers, there's mountains, and there's iguanas, and there's some beautiful parrots that make funny noises. So, I really like this illustration. Once again, remember it's a collage, and you can see the water in the front, then you see the trees, and you see the mountains, and you see the birds at the top. Please turn the page. I do not need side comments, okay? Iguaca, iguaca! The parrots called as they flew to Sierra palm trees to eat their dark, bitter fruit. Around 5000 BCE, people came to the island in canoes from land to the south. These people planted corn, yucca, sweet potatoes, peanuts, and pineapple. When they looked up, they saw the bright blue flashes of flight feathers. Fun fact, anyone know anything about flight feathers? Flight feathers on birds? Anyone know anything about them? Connor?
They have some flying.
Yeah, if like a bird doesn't have its flight feathers, they won't be able to fly like the right way. Fun fact. That's just a fun fact. Most groups of people, the Taitinos, more groups of people, the Tainanos, I don't know, arrived around 800 CE. They hunted the parrots for food and kept them as pets. Tainos gave the parrots a name, Iguaca, after their harsh call. They gave the island a name too, Rican. So, what is one reason we have already learned that made the parrots become endangered? Dylan?
They're being hunted for food.
Yeah, people were eating these parrots, which I'm just going to let you know. I don't know how parrots taste. I'm going to go out on a limb and say these parrots are probably illegal to kill now because they were almost endangered. But a lot of people eat birds. Like, that's not a weird thing to eat birds. Like turkey's technically a bird. Goose, duck, people eat that. Chicken, yeah, that's a bird. But parrots, I've never personally heard of anyone eating a parrot. And then they were also keeping them as a pet. So by keeping them in pet, the animals were held what? It's one of our vocab words. Captivity. So they were keeping the birds in captivity where they probably weren't very happy, right? Because they liked the high trees and stuff and they hadn't been used to being pets. And they also were killing them for food. But they named them Guaca after their crazy sound. All right. Iguaca, guaca, the parrots called when hurricane winds blew down the old trees where they had their nests. After the hurricanes passed, the parrots flew through the treetops to find new nesting holes. Christopher Columbus sailed from Europe to Rican in 1493 and claimed the island for Spain. Soon, Spanish settlers were planting crops on the island and building houses and schools with wood, bricks, and stone. Each time hurricane destroyed their homes and schools, the settlers rebuilt them. The Spaniards called the parrots cotorrajas, and they gave the island a new name, Puerto Rico, which means rich port. So, the Taínos from the first page, when they arrived, they named the parrots the Iguacas, they named the island, and they also hunted the parrots. Not nice. And then later, the Spaniards came, which were people of Spain. Someone summarized what changes the Spaniards came. What changes to the islands did the Spaniards bring? Gabrielle? They changed the parrot's name and they changed the island's name. So that is 2 changes. What other changes did they bring to the island? What's another change? Someone I haven't talked to. Connor. What are you doing right now, sir? You need to do the right thing, Connor. What else did they do, Kaden? Right, they were using things in the surrounding area like the wood of the trees and stuff. They built schools, they built homes. And if a hurricane came through, Puerto Rico does get a lot of hurricanes because where it's located, they just kept on rebuilding. So the Spaniards definitely changed lots of different things. Please turn the page to 360. All right, so far lots of changes have been happening to our little parrots' lives. In the treetops, the parrots searched for mates. That's okay, Mark. The new pairs of parrots sat on branches, bowing, calling back and forth to each other, and fluffing their wings and tails. Each pair raised one family of chicks every year. So what is a mate? Ryden? Right, yeah, it's a bird looking for the opposite gender so that they can have their little baby chicks together. So in a year, they only make one family of chicks. Some animals can lay like a chicken lays an egg like basically every day, sometimes a couple times a day. But these parrots, they only lay their eggs one time a year. Okay, so that means that they're not making a parrot a day, right? They only make a few a year. Now people from many other parts of the world came to live in Puerto Rico. In 1513, Africans were brought to the island to toil as slaves under the hot sun in fields of sugarcane and other crops. More people came from Spain too, and they married Tatinos and Africans. They called themselves Boricuas, people of Boricua, however we said that, but they were still ruled by Spain. So even though Spain changed the name to Puerto Rico, the people that were there first, the Titanos were there first. They're still keeping their original name for the island, okay? Even though it's now ruled by Spain, but that's besides the point. So we know so far about the parrots that they mate and they have chicks. And we also know that now lots and lots of people are living on the island. So they have less space for themselves, right? The parrots. And we're still not 100% sure on why they vanished. Besides the fact we know that sometimes they were kept in captivity and sometimes they were hunted, okay? Guaca, guaca! The parrots called when red-tailed hawks chased them in the treetops. The parrots flocked together to protect themselves from the hawks. Oh, snap. Mean old hawks. For centuries, people from other countries in Europe tried to capture Puerto Rico. These countries wanted to control the deep harbor in San Juan, the capital city, where merchant ships and warships could be launched. But the Barracas protected their island. Starting in 1539, they built a fort that grew and grew until its walls were 18 feet thick. That's a thick wall. For hundreds of years, no country was able to take Puerto Rico away from Spain. Okay, so that's interesting. So what's another thing that possibly endangered these lovely parrots? What's another thing? Someone raise their hand and tell me. Bryden, sit up, please. What's another thing? If you want to answer, you need to raise your hand. Dylan.
So maybe they were caught in a battle over the land.
Right, like if there's a ton of fighting and war going on in in the lands, like that, they could have been killed, accidentally by war, or they're building this fort. Like imagine how much space it's taking up, just if it's 18 feet thick walls. So that's land it's taking up. Maybe their homes were destroyed. And then there's another thing. What else? What else hurt them? The hawks. But there's actually a problem solution within that little paragraph about the hawks, okay? So a guaca, the parrots called when red-tailed hawks chased them into treetops. The parrots flocked together to protect themselves from the hawks. So problem, hawks trying to get them. What was the parrot's solution, Mia? Yeah, to stay together. That way they weren't all alone and could be, easily preyed upon. There was a ton of parrots. So that would be a problem solution that we just found within our story. Yay! All right. Now, the Barracos, or however we say that name, also had a problem. And they also had a solution. What was the Barracos people's problem? Landon? No, they are part of the Spain people. They just have different names. So I'm going to disagree with you. What is the Barracos people's problem on this lovely page? What's their problem? Someone besides Dylan. What's their problem? Mrs. Clapper's gonna keep singing till someone else answers besides someone I haven't heard. Jaden, give me a try. What's their problem? Right, people are all different types of countries are like, oh snap, I want that because they have a really great harbor. They have great places to launch ships from. What was their solution? Everyone's trying to attack us. Their solution was what, Connor? Well, it's not the Wall of China. I disagree. Why don't you try again and say the right thing? Yeah, they built the fort that had walls 18 feet thick. So this page specifically is organized how? Ethan? No. Caden? No. Jaden, next time raise your hand. Problem solution. On this page alone, we found 2 problems and solutions. So this page, 361, we have some problem solution text structure. So far throughout the story, though, we have had sequential order. How do we know we've had sequential order so far through the story, Mia? Right, there's different dates. So it said long before people came. Then we had 5000 BCE. Then we had 800 CE. Then we had 1493. Then we had 1513. Then we had 39. So that is chronological order. It's giving us dates. It's showing this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Please turn the page. Guaca, guaca! The parrots called when they found that their nesting holes had been invaded by creatures brought to the island by settlers. Black rats from the settler ship climbed the tall trees and ate the parrots' eggs. Honeybees that had escaped their hives swarmed the parrots' nests. So we just found two more things that possibly added to the parrots' endangered. What is another thing that added to the parrots' endangered list? Amia? Right, so they couldn't get to their nest, that they had spent all that time building because bees were swarming it. And what was the other thing that was super bad, no good? Eden?
They were eating the parents' eggs.
Yeah, rats were eating the parrots' eggs. Well, if they only lay eggs once a year, and then those eggs are eaten, okay, well, they can't just lay more eggs. They're going to have to wait till next mating season to lay more eggs. So that's a whole, family of parrots wiped out. So that stinks. And they got here because settlers from other countries brought this stuff here. So the black rats were not originally part of the Puerto Rican islands or whatever they were named beforehand. People brought them here, same with the honeybees. And now we are in 1898. The United States declared war on Spain. The war was really about Cuba, another one of Spain's colonies, but the fighting spilled over into Puerto Rico. Thousands of American soldiers landed on the island and began battling Spanish troops. Spain lost the war and lost control of Puerto Rico. The island became the territory of the United States, and in 1917, Puerto Ricans became U.S. citizens. So raise your hand if you already knew that the United States owned Puerto Rico. Did any of you know that? There's always discussion on if Puerto Rico is going to become like one of the 51st states. Like that's been discussed a lot. But the United States does own Puerto Rico, and if you are born in Puerto Rico, you're a United States citizen, even though you don't, anyways. But so they are United States citizens. So Spain had control of, they got Puerto Rico in 1493, Spain did. And they didn't lose control until like 1898. So they had it for like hundreds of years. Okay. They had it for a really long time. But then they finally lost it to the United States. So once again, we've just learned about, so far, what are things that have harmed the parrots? People hunted them. People kept them in cages. Black rats ate their babies. Bees went into their little nests. People were taking the wood from trees and building things with it. People were fighting on the land. All these things have so far hurt the poor little parrots. Right. I'm sure most people were unaware that the population was probably going further down. Quacka, quacka! The parrots called as the forest where they made their nests were cut down. The parrots began to disappear from places where they had flown for millions of years. By 1937, there were only about 2,000 Puerto Rican parrots in the Luquillon Mountains to the east. A few years later, the parrots were living in just one place, El Yulkin, a tropical rainforest in those mountains. So originally, the parrots had reign of the entire island. Like this island was their home, and there was so many of them. But by 1937, there was only about 2,000 parrots, which is not that many parrots, in case you're wondering. And they had lived in only one tiny little place. So originally, they had spanned the whole mountain, but their forest where they had lived had been cut down. They weren't able to make their nests. Obviously, there's people everywhere that they probably weren't happy with, so they just lived in one little place in the mountains. After Puerto Ricans gained American citizenship, many of them moved to the United States. Those who stayed in rural parts of the island built homes and farms in the areas where parrots had once lived. Many of the parrots' tall old trees were made into charcoal to use for cooking fires, and people still hunted and trapped the parrots. So here we are, 500 years later, people are still hunting the parrots to eat them. And there's only 2,000 of them. Well, if we're hunting only 2,000, obviously they're not going to last much longer. So, also, fun fact, like endangered species and extinct species like lists didn't necessarily like that wasn't like the prime thing back in the 1900s. People weren't necessarily worried about animals that were going endangered because selfish people that we are, because humans are selfish, we just think that the animals are going to live on forever. So people didn't, like Ethan said, people didn't realize probably how bad they were hurting the parrots population, even though they were, just because that wasn't what they were focused on. They were focusing on building their homes and stuff like that. So the official cause is what? Do you need something, Landon? Yes. What? No, you don't need something. Well, then stop raising your hand. So the official cause, official is the rainforests are officially being cut down. But obviously, we had all those other things that happened before even their rainforests were cut down. In the 1950s, birds called pearly-eyed thrashers moved into the rainforest and tried to steal the parrots' nesting holes. Like these poor parrots can't catch a break. Like clever thieves, these birds entered places where other birds are struggling to live and compete with them for nest sites. The parrots fought the thrashers, jabbing at them with their sharp beaks and defending their nests with harsh cries. But the parrots now had too many enemies and too few trees. The flock became smaller and smaller. By 1954, there were only 200 pairs left. That's sad. So they went from 2,000 to 200 in like 20 years. So they just had a lot of other animals that didn't like them, and they just couldn't compete with how small they were. So, what does the author use to describe the pearly-eyed thrashers? They use a simile. A simile, remember, is comparing using like or as. Find me the simile for the pearly-eyed thrashers. Mia? Like clever thieves. So she's saying pearly-eyed thrashers are like, that's our simile, comparing using like or as, clever thieves. So those bad pearly thrashers. Puerto Ricans elected their first governor, and the island became a U.S. Commonwealth. Not a state, not an independent nation, but something in between. People argued, should the island remain a Commonwealth? Should it be a state? Should it be independent of the United States? Everybody had a different idea, but all were proud to say, yo soy Boricua. I am Puerto Rican. So remember how I said it's been like a debate if they're going to become a state or not? Still like a thing today. So just based off of what we read on this page, the parrots in 1950s, they only have 200 things, only 200 left, and they have a lot of enemies. So let's predict, what do you think would happen next? What would happen? There's only 200 left. They have so many enemies. They have very little space to live. What is the thing that's probably going to happen next? Blake? You think people are going to realize there's not going to be as much? Okay, so people might see like, oh no, we don't really see these anymore. Let's change our ways. What's something else that might happen, Kaden? Right, they might just keep on getting less and less and less if people don't realize, like Blake said. All right, next page. The flock of Puerto Rican parrots became even smaller. By 1967, only 24 parrots lived in El Yukon. Quacka, quacka. The parrots called as they looked for someplace, any place to find food and nesting holes for their chicks. Only 24. So there's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 15. So if we added 9 more people to this room, that is exactly how many parrots there were in Puerto Rican parrots in the entire world. That's it. That is definitely almost extinct, right? Only 24. That would be like if there's only 24 people left in the world. Like that would be like so minimal, so small. So obviously that's majorly endangered, right? Only 24. Puerto Ricans looked up and saw their iguacas were almost gone. People had nearly caused the pirates to become extinct. Now people started to help the parrots stay alive. I said parrots. Okay, well, I meant parrots. In 1968, the government of the United States and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico worked together to create the Puerto Rican Parrot Recovery Program. Its goal was to save and protect the parrots. The first part of the plan was to create an aviary, a safe place for parrots to live and raise chicks. So an aviary is kind of like, you know how we talked about national parks the other week, and like it's a place where the animals like can't be hunted and stuff unless there's certain rules. So they created a place where humans like couldn't go and take wood or couldn't go and take land. It's a safe place just for these parrots. That way they're able to repopulate. They're able to lay their eggs safely. So, what problems did the Puerto Ricans realize about the parrots? The Puerto Ricans realized what? Yeah.
They were gonna go extinct.
Right. The Puerto Ricans were like, oh snap, our parrots are going to go extinct. That's the problem. Their solution was what? What was their solution? I literally just said it. Haley, what was their solution? Right, they created the aviary. It's a safe place for the little birdies to fly and be safe. All right, turn the page. All right. Parrots squawked as scientists with long-handled nets gently lifted eggs and chicks from their nesting holes. The scientists always left at least one egg or chick in the nest so some birds could continue living in the wild. In 1973, Lowico Aviary opened in El Yucawan, however you say that. Incubators in the aviary kept eggs warm. The Puerto Rican parrots raised in captivity had no experience as parents, so Hispaniola parrots helped raise the chicks. These parrots came from a nearby island of Hispaniola. They are cousins to the Puerto Rican parrot, but are not as rare. So to create this aviary, they had to put them in captivity. We talked about yesterday how sometimes one reason to put animals in captivity is so we can make the population grow. So they left some birds in the wild, but then they took some eggs and they took a few parrots and they put them in the safe place so they could repopulate. But the parrots that they took into the aviary didn't know how to be parents, so they borrowed some other parrots from another place and was like, hey, help teach these guys how to be parents. So the incubators obviously keep the eggs warm so they're able to hatch. But remember, they still kept at least one in the wild, so they're still repopulating in the wild, but then they're also repopulating in the aviary. And they borrowed these lovely parrots from the other place to help them out. So that's a step in the right direction, right? Getting them to repopulate. Because if we don't ever get them to repopulate, then they're just going to die out. Okay? Like they have to have more little chickies. Once hundreds of thousands of Puerto Rican parrots flew over the island. By 1975, only 13 parrots were left in the rainforest. So that means that's how many are left in the wild. There's still some in the aviary, but in the wild, there used to be hundreds of thousands. Now there's 13. So that's less than everyone in here. In the wild. That's it. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. There's 15 people in here. So if you take me and Kaden out, that's how many are in the wild. That is a very small number compared to hundreds of thousands. The worried scientists built special nesting boxes and put them in trees in areas where the parrots were likely to nest. The parrots inspected the nesting boxes and then moved in. These nesting boxes were deep and dark, like nesting holes Puerto Rican parrots find in the wild. The birds sitting at the top of the box could not see all the way to the bottom. Pearly-eyed thrashers could see the bottoms of their nests, so the thrashers left the parrots' nesting boxes alone. So, problem, parrots going extinct. So far, we have 2 solutions in our story that we have read that people are doing, scientists are doing to help the parrots. What is one of the solutions that we have read about so far, Mia? Yeah, bringing them to the safe aviary while they're repopulating. Woo! What's the other thing, Mia? Right, instead of the parrots having to find their own nest and having trouble with that, they made them boxes and they put them like, oh, we know where parrots like to nest, let's put them here, and the parrots were able to move into them. Fabulous. So that was another way that scientists were helping them. So, okay, Turn the page. I think that's all I wanted to say there. Paragraph 31. Wild parrots squawked as scientists gently placed chicks from the aviary in their nests so chicks could learn how to live in the wild. In 1979, the very first chick raised in the aviary flapped out of a wild nest into the rainforest. So they didn't keep them in the aviary forever. Once they were, hatched, baby chicks, they put them back into the wild, and then they were free as birds. Get it? Because we're talking about birds. The scientists work hard to keep the parrots healthy, both the captive and the wild birds. One chick was rescued from the wild after its wings were badly damaged by gooey slime inside its nest. The scientists rebuilt the baby parrot's wing using old discarded parrot feathers, pins, and glue. Then they watched the parrot use its new wing to fly for the first time. By the end of 1979, there were 15 captive parrots. Most of them had come from eggs and chicks taken from wild nests in the aviary. So there's some out in the wild, and there's 15 held captive. So just what do you think? What do you think? Has the aviary been successful? Yes or no, and why do you think yes or no? Olivia?
I think yes, because if they're sending off babies in the wild, I mean it's definitely successful. Because if they weren't, then we would know that it wasn't successful, or they might be taking it. But there were 15 birds being held captive, so you can tell that it was successful.
Right. So remember, the aviary originally only had no birds when there was only 15 in the wild. And now there's at least 15 in captivity, and we know there's some in the wild. So their population has probably doubled now, which is any type of more parrots is probably successful. They're able to let some birds go. They're even helping injured birds. So I agree with Olivia. I think the aviary has been pretty successful so far. Okay. All right. 34. Hurricane Hugo roared through the treetops of Puerto Rico in 1989. Guaca, guaca, the parrots called as the winds blew down many of their tall trees. The hurricane wiped out crops and wrecked buildings and homes. In the aviary, the scientists worried about all the parrots. What if another bad hurricane blew down more trees? What if the aviary was damaged? Someone tell me what phrase on this page is used in many other parts of the story. We keep on hearing the same thing over and over. What do we keep on hearing, Ethan? Yeah, what the parrots are saying. So almost all the pages are starting with the parrot's noise and how they're reacting to each different situation. So by repeating the parrot's noise, it's like getting our attention because one way is because Ms. Kneippel says it's so fun, and two, it is helping us because we're knowing like, oh snap, we're hearing the parrots again. That means something else has happened to these poor parrots. These poor parrots can't get a break. Turn the page. Oh look, here it is again. A guaca, guaca. A group of parrots squawked as scientists moved them from Lulico Aviary to the new aviary in Rio Abajo Forest. This forest is less humid than El Yico, and many parrots had once lived there. Now there were 2 safe places for captive parrots to live and raise chicks. So they have an aviary, and guess what? They made another aviary. More safe places for the chicks. And for the birds, obviously, the more safe places, the better. I don't know. Well, because they got to catch the birds. It's probably not that easy. Rio Abajo Aviary opened in 1993. It had some challenges. Thunderstorms sometimes caused the incubators to lose power. The scientists found generators that kept the power flowing into the incubators. So there's a problem and solution. Incubators lose power. Solution, get a generator. That's nice. The scientists also tried some new ideas. They kept the more aggressive pairs of parrots away from the gentler ones, so the gentler birds would not be frightened. They also caged young parrots with adults, so birds could see how adult parrots behave. The number of parrots in the aviary grew. By 1999, the Rio Abajo Aviary had 54 Puerto Rican parrots. The recovery program was ready for the next part of the plan, releasing adult parrots raised in captivity into the wild. So, oh snap, a few years ago, there was only like 15 parrots total. And now just this one aviary has over 50. So that's fantastic. But now we need to get some of the adults that have never been in the wild into the wild so they can figure out what to do. So some problems are the generator thing, and they want to protect the gentler birds. So there's really nice passive birds that are just nice and tweety. So that there's a problem. Super, super nice birds were getting scared by aggressive birds. What was the solution to this problem, Connor?
Are you Connor?
What?
The problem was separation.
That was not the problem. I disagree. The problem was there was these really nice birds getting scared. What did they do?
I mean, from hawks.
We're not talking about hawks anymore.
The hawks are destroying.
No, we're not talking about the hawks. We're talking only about parrots right now. There's these really nice, gentle parrots, and then there's a little bit more aggressive parrots. Just like some dogs are more aggressive than other dogs. So, what was the solution, Connor? No, that was not the solution. I'm going to let you know you need to start paying attention better. Blake. Right, they put the more, feisty, aggressive parrots together, and they put the nice parrots together. Like, that makes sense. Like, nice with nice, aggressive with aggressive. That way no one was scaring each other. That everyone was the same temperament that was hanging out. Also, like, here's a baby. Doesn't know what to do, just like in real life, babies, look up to their parents, look up to their older siblings, and they find what to do. So they put the baby parrots with the older parrots. That way they could learn what to do in their lives. And now we are in 2000. Oh, snap. In 2000, 10 captive bred parrots were released in El Yucua. It was late spring. These wild chicks had already flown from their nest, and the wild adults were still nearby, where the captive bred parrots could see them and join them. Iguaca, iguaca, the parrots called as they flew with the newcomers and searched for food. So far, they're just letting them right on in, which is obviously the goal. The captive bred parrots had been trained to find food and avoid hawks, but many were caught by hawks anyways. So before the next 16 parrots were released in 2001, they were given extra training. They heard a hawk's whistle as a cutout shape of a hawk was passed over their cage. They watched a trained hawk attack a Hispaniola parrot that was wearing a protective leather jacket. In time, the parrots learned to stay still and hide if a hawk was nearby. When those parrots were released, more of them survived in the wild. So, lots of things they did. They created the aviaries. They put the aggressive ones with the aggressive ones. They put the gentler ones with the gentler ones. And they also trained them to stay away from hawks. That's amazing. These little birds, they were able to train in captivity to know hawks, bad. If you hear this sound, bad. Stay still. Hide. That is just amazing to me, I feel like. What? Right, and yeah, so there's this one parrot, he was like sacrificial, he had to be attacked, but it was for a good cause. So thank you, Hispaniola, that helped us. And you can see, there's this illustration. It shows you the little bird in the protective leather jacket, and then like hawks right there. So yeah, fun. All right, final page, my friends. 41. The scientists were ready to create a second wild flock. In 2006, 22 captive bred parrots were released in the Rio Abajo forest. The newly released birds formed pairs, found nesting boxes, and raised their chicks. Dozens of parrots had been released in Rio Abajo since then and have begun to spread out through the forest. Yay! If you look up from the forest and you are very lucky, you might catch the bright blue flashes of flight feathers. These are Puerto Rican parrots. They lived on this island for millions of years, and then they nearly vanished from the earth forever, but they are still flying over Puerto Rico, still calling iguaca, iguaca. Where did we hear that final paragraph before? Text to text connection. If you want to answer, raise your hand. Land in for the 486th time today. Dylan.
Okay. Oh, it was also the first paragraph.
Right, it was the first paragraph. The only thing that changed was instead of this is their story, now it says but they are flying over Puerto Rico, still calling it guaca guaca. Shh, friends, I need your eyeballs on me, please. All right. Why do you think the author chose to end this text this way by repeating the same paragraph but changing that last sentence? Why do you think they tried? Why do you think the author did that, Olivia?
That the parrots are still here, except there's not many of them.
Well, there's a lot more than there was. We're in the middle of the story. I think the author probably chose to do that to show like how the beginning of it was connected to the end of the story. Like they're still parrots, they're still in Puerto Rico, they're still living their best life, or at least trying to. So we are just about out of time, which is good we were able to finish it. So don't leave if you're on a thing. Today, if you have not finished your vocabulary homework, you need to. Some of you did your vocabulary homework, but you did something wrong, so I made a comment on it. So if I returned it to you, you're good to go. If you turned it in and I haven't returned it to you, which is literally like 5 of you in here, I think, right now, make sure you check it and fix it. It is due by tomorrow at 8 a.m. Ethan, please stop. Tomorrow, we're going to work with the story. We're going to answer some questions, talk more about problem solution, and then Thursday, STAR test. So I will see you all later. Have a lovely day. If you're in class, you should be checking to see how your vocabulary homework went right now.